Rebellions are built on hope.
Incoming transmission. Radio Rebellion.
Welcome to another episode of Radio Rebellion, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alberto Calderon, and thank you for joining us on another great Star Wars weekend. It's Saturday, it's the weekend, we're loving it. Taking a little break, no work. I'm on a work vacation for another week, so relaxing, trying to take it easy. A lot of work around the house, but it's to be expected when you take time off. But we're here to talk Star Wars, and we got a great guest joining us today, some great topics to go over, so I can't wait to talk to you guys. So how you guys doing? Thank you as always for being here. If you're joining us on the chat, thank you. It's always good to have you here. Our friend Dale, how you doing, Dale? Welcome. Glad you can catch us today, Dale. I know you've been working hard, doing your yard, doing some stuff over there. Glad to have you here on the live show today, as always. Hasn't been a lot of Star Wars news really this past week. Kenobi's coming. The Andor show we talked about last week is going to be great. But Star Wars, apart from the Bad Batch, not a lot of news out there, which is fine. Taking it slow, talking Bad Batch. It's going to keep ramping up as we get closer to all the new shows out there. We had a great time last night. We joined the Geeky Waffle on their Bad Batch recap videos that they do every 2 weeks, talking about the yesterday's episode and the week before. So a lot of fun there. So you guys should go check it out on the Geeky Waffle podcast YouTube page. A lot of great guests were there yesterday. So we had a lot of fun. Hope you guys, if you didn't catch it, go watch it whenever you get a chance. So like I mentioned, if you guys are watching this, make sure you hit that like button, that thumbs up. It always helps knowing that you guys are liking what we're doing. If you're watching this later on the replay, make sure to leave us a comment. What do you think about Bad Batch in general? Episode 8, the Midway Point reunion, was a great episode yesterday. Let us know what you think. We're also going to be talking about Dooku, Jedi Lost, that great audiobook by Cavan Scott. So let us know. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you're listening to this on the audio podcast when it comes out later this week, thank you also. And make sure that you're following it so you don't miss when new episodes come. And leave us a rating, leave us a review. Reading those are always fun and also help us. So thank you. And I think that should be enough for right now. Let's go ahead and bring our guest. I'm very excited. It was very short notice. I didn't know if I was going to have a guest or not this week. My first guest, Meg Dowell, couldn't make it. She had some important family things to deal with. She couldn't come. But then I put out the word out there on Twitter. And about 2 days ago, got a call back. And she's here. We're going to have a lot of fun with the host of the I Rebel podcast. It is Jedi Geek Girl. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, again, thank you. Like, we're talking a little bit before we started, and I just said it was very short notice, but you shoot me a DM on Twitter. Hey, you still need a guest. Let me know. You say that Dooku Jedi Lost is one of your favorite stories. So very excited to have you here to talk about Dooku, Bad Batch, and a lot of other stuff.
I am so excited to talk about Dooku Jedi Lost. It is definitely one of my favorite stories in canon. And I knew that this episode of Bad Batch, this last episode, there was a lot of hype for the reveal. Yeah. We'll get into that later. Mm-hmm. So I knew I had to talk about Dooku Jedi Lost because it's like right up there, top 5, not counting the TV shows, films, and the video games, it's probably top 3.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about it later, but I got into Dooku Jedi Lost pretty late. I know this book, I got that book, but it came out as an audio drama, I guess, about 1 or 2 years ago. And I heard great things about it, but I didn't pick it up till about a week or so ago. Like I said, I was on vacation, so I had extra time. So let me get it, see what all the hype is. And it is a great story. So can't wait to get into that with you in a few minutes. But before we jump into Bad Batch, Dooku, and all that other stuff, It's your first time here. Like I said, thanks again. But can you tell us a little bit for your own podcast, the iRebel podcast? What can people expect from it? When did the idea came to do a podcast, and just a little bit of background on it?
Sure. So I originally started podcasting in 2016 with a podcast covering Star Wars Destiny. Star Wars
Okay.
Destiny is
Mhm.
a card and dice CCG game by Fantasy Flight Games. I did that up until 2017, where I launched my own podcast called I Rebel, still focusing on Star Wars Destiny. I
Okay.
did that up until last year, where the game ended and I had to move on, so I changed
Mhm.
over to just focusing on Star Wars in general. I Rebel is a podcast where I have rotating guests on,
Mhm.
like you do, from other sources, one or two guests, and I alternate between a canon story and a legend story each episode. So like episode 101 was like Thrawn, Heir
Mhm.
to the Empire. Then 102 was Phantom Menace, and so on, alternating back
Okay.
and forth.
Cool. Very interesting. It's hard. I'm sure, as you know, trying to branch out doing Star Wars podcasts because there are so many Star Wars podcasts out there, and a lot of them kind of do the same thing. And I'll throw myself in. There's either talking about the weekly news, covering the show. So a lot of them are very similar. And it is difficult to find a little niche out there to branch out a little bit. And I think doing what you're doing, 1 week do Legends, 1 week do Canon, kind of mix it up. It's very interesting for the fans out there. So make sure if you guys aren't checking iRebel, make sure you guys check that out. So just to get to know you a little bit better, what's your Star Wars story? Because we're all fans. I mean, we don't gatekeep. If you like one movie, you're a Star Wars fan. If you jump into everything, you're a Star Wars fan. But to get to a point that we're doing a podcast, there has to be some a lot of dedication to it, I guess. But when did you get interested in Star Wars that took you into this trajectory and this journey to then want to do a podcast about it?
My story started back in 1996. I was a wee little youngling, and one of the habits I had growing up was going through my mother's videotape collection.
Mhm.
One day, I stumbled across the THX Star Wars Trilogy box set. I
Wow.
watched it, and I know that I watched it a lot. Don't ask me how many times, but I know I was really into it.
Mhm.
And that is where my love with Star Wars really began. I was always a fan, but I wasn't really hardcore into it. Like growing up,
Mhm.
my EU, my investment into Star Wars was the video games. And
Okay.
then, real life happened, and I was just being an adult, going to college, and I
Yeah.
never really paid attention to it. And it wasn't until The Force Awakens was announced and getting back into Star Wars in 2015 that in 2016 where I really dove into Star Wars, and I'm like, you know what, the canon was resetted. I can do this because you have a new beginning. So I
Yeah.
decided to go back and catch up on canon, and then I caught up on after I got caught up on canon, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and dive into Legends because there isn't as much pressure as there was back in the day with all the content. Like, one of the reasons why I never dove into Legends back in the day is not only was there a whole bunch of new stuff coming out in the prequel trilogy, but there was all this back stuff. So it was kind of hard to
Mhm.
catch up and keep relevant. Where with canon is a little bit slower, and I'm already caught up, so I can take the downtime to catch up on Legends because I don't have to worry about Legends changing. So that's pretty much been it's my journey. So
Yeah, I mean, I understand completely, especially when you talk about, oh, canon is new, starting fresh. Just real quick, I grew up with Star Wars. I was born in 1980, so I grew up with the original trilogy. But then when there was nothing, me starting to be a teenager, I kind of drop off because there wasn't really anything, no movies. I wasn't into the EU stuff at that point, and it wasn't until the special editions were released late in the 90s that I really got back into Star Wars, and from then it just kept growing. But I never got into the EU novels because they just seemed too many out there, like you mentioned. But once the new canon started and they said, okay, the EU is still there, but we're not going to continue with it, this is the new starting point, I did the same thing in terms of the book. I said, okay, now I can start fresh with the new canon stories. I've seen all the movies, but now I can also dive into the books. And it's been a lot easier to follow now because we've been there since the start. I haven't really gone back to the EU, although I've read a few books out there, not a lot. I gotta pick up some of them. I know the Darth Plagueis book is one that I need to pick up at one point. But yeah, once the new canon started, it was a lot easier to now kind of jump in and grow with it. So it's very interesting. We both have that kind of same idea when the new canon was started. So where did the name I Rebel came from? We know this from, of course, Gene also mentioned it in that trailer for Rogue One, but was that where you wanted to use that name for a reason, or where did you decide to go with that name for the podcast?
So obviously the name came from the Rogue One trailer, and I was really attached to that quote because I feel like who I am as a person, how I act, my personality. I'm very rebellious. I am very independent. I don't conform. I like standing out, and I'm basically a rebel at heart, for better and for worse. It's not all good. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
And it's a cheesy line, but it really stuck out with me. And another reason is I feel like, and I noticed this as I got older, whatever, I can relate to Jen. And I can see a lot of myself and a lot of my story in her. And it's kind of interesting because her story, as told in Rogue One, is like this one story is fixed. However, our life doesn't just start and end in 2.5 hours. It is a constant thing. So I find myself connecting to her and then connecting to her and then connecting to her because, life is, things just keep on happening. It's like, I wish it was a transformative thing, but like real life isn't like you just don't have a magical moment and everything changes. It's a constant change or whatever. So yeah, I really stuck out with that and I really connected with that, and that is why I went with the name.
Yeah, I mean, great. I mean, the more I'm into this podcasting and Star Wars Twitter and things of that nature, starting to see more and more people relate to Gina Erso and her story, which is, it is interesting, and also another reason why we need more diversity out there because more people connect to different characters. But it's great to see that Gina Erso, even though she was only in one movie, has this arc, or her story connects so much with people out there. I've been reading, I don't know if you read Rebel Rising, that novel. I've been reading it this week. It's very interesting. Goes deep into Gina Erso's background and growing up from the beginning of Rogue One when she's left by herself after her parents are killed and Saw Gerrera rescue her. It goes all through her teenage years till we meet her in Rogue One. So it's very interesting that book, which gives us more background on Gina Erso. So being a Rogue One fan, a Gina Erso fan, are you interested in the new Cassian Andor TV show that's coming hopefully next year?
Oh yeah, I definitely cannot wait. I love Cassian as well. I'm looking forward to diving back into that semi-universe with some of those characters. I mean, obviously there's rumors and there's been confirmations and stuff like that. It's going to be really interesting diving back into that world. It's going to be interesting for it to experience that story without Jen. But, I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I believe it's going to be more than one season, like 1 or 2, so should be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I know at some point they say it was a like a limited series or something like that, and then there was some comments. Oh, excuse me. First that K2SO was going to be in this season, then no, maybe in season 2. So I don't know. I don't think it's been official how many seasons. I do hope it's more than one, but we'll see. It's one of those series that's difficult to gauge how long it can go, knowing that Rogue One is right there. So it can be like 6 seasons. So we'll see. We won't have a lot of time to wait for it. So apart from the Cassian Andor series, we have a lot of other Star Wars TV shows coming, a few movies that we know are around the corner, and of course all the new books, the High Republic and all that stuff. What else has you, or what are you looking forward to in Star Wars in the coming years? Is there one story that you're really looking forward to?
That is such a hard question because it's like, what is the qualifier? If you made a qualifier, it would be a lot easier for me to pick. It's like, hey, what of the TV and film? Like, what are you looking for? Like, what book are you telling? Like, there's so many. I'm gonna give you my top 5.
Okay.
Doc. Well, what is that one with Dark Acolyte?
The Acolyte, yes.
Yeah, Acolyte is one. Rogue Squadron, with Patty Jenkins.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. More the High Republic. I know that we're still in the High Republic, but I still count that as more. And Jedi Fallen Order 2.
Okay, cool. That's one I drop off from the games. I just heard great things about Jedi Fallen Order. I've only watched the cinematics, so I know the story. But yes, I know a lot of people are very hyped for Fallen Order 2. Completely agree 100% with the High Republic. Even though we started, there's still so much, and that's what I'm extremely excited for, is the continuation of the High Republic. Andor, for me, has always been one that I've been extremely excited for. And of course, Kenobi. And when the Acolyte was announced, that went up real high on my looking forward to list. So I think we're in a similar mind range in the things we're looking forward to out there.
Did I mention Obi-Wan Kenobi? I don't remember, but I'm also looking forward to Obi-Wan Kenobi because I'm a prequel baby, so I'm looking forward.
Yeah, prequels. That's the hot thing out there. The prequels, all the people that grew up with the prequels are now out there. The adults, they're letting their voices be heard, and it's great that it's gotten all this love now. Even I loved the prequels when I watched them when they came out. I dropped off a little bit, but the more I watch them, the more I entertain with them. Right now, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie of all of them. So the prequels, man, I get it. Prequel babies out there, keep doing what you're doing because you're making this a lot better for a lot of us.
If I may say, my favorite Star Wars film is Revenge of the Sith. And The Phantom Menace is a film that the more I watch it, the more I love. I notice. It seems like, obviously as you get older, you see more and more layers. And I think of all the Star Wars films, The Phantom Menace is one that my love just keeps growing and growing and growing for it. I don't know if it will move up my list or like my ranking or whatever, but that's just something I have to say. And yes, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars film.
Yeah, I understand for Phantom Menace. I always like Phantom Menace, but it was on the bottom of my list. Late last year, I watched all the movies and to talk about them in the podcast, and then wanted to do a ranking. And when I watched The Phantom Menace, it was the most fun I had watching all of the movies. It wasn't my favorite, but it jumped a lot of spots of how fun that movie is and how much it introduces. It builds this new galaxy that we didn't know at the time. So there's a lot to love on Phantom Menace, and it's a very entertaining movie. So yeah, I think I'm right there with you. The more I watch it, the more it kind of grows on you. So yeah.
I think with one of its biggest criticisms, obviously growing up and you hear people talking about it, a lot of people didn't really care for The Phantom Menace because it feels like it is very disconnected to the other, at the time, 5. Where now I think it's actually a benefit that is a little, obviously it's connected to the other Star Wars film, but I actually think it is more of a benefit that is more connected because it's like you can just watch it just like you can A New Hope and just enjoy it and stand on its own. So I actually think with it being more distant from the other Star Wars films, I actually think that's more of a benefit now than a hindrance.
Yeah, I think I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes, now that we know the whole story and we can see where it began, basically, it gives it a different vibe to it, and I agree. It's a very interesting way to look at it from that point of view, but yeah, I think it does make sense. All right, so I think you guys are ready. I'm ready. So let's talk Star Wars, and today let's talk about the Bad Batch. Episode 8. I don't know why I have episode 7 down there, but episode 8 reunion. Let me update this real quick. And we had the return, and we'll talk more about it, the return of Crosshair and the Empire. But so yes, Bad Batch episode 8. So we're halfway through the Bad Batch now, starting the second half next week. Before we jump into this episode, what are your thoughts about the Bad Batch so far? I guess first, were you interested when this was announced at the next animated show? And what are your general thoughts of the first 7 episodes before we talked about episode 8?
So when the show first originally got announced, I was like, really? You're going to do a show on these 4 characters? I mean, like, I get it, but it's like I was hoping that you would go a different direction with the anime. Like, I get it that you're trying to target certain demographics, and it's like, of course, you want the clone stories and stuff like something like that. But I want a different story. I want a story that's more something that I would be interested in, and I just didn't think much about it. And then I saw the trailer. And like I said, prequel baby, and I just absolutely, as soon as you hear Palpatine say he's speaking to the clone, execute Order 66, I was like, okay, I'm hooked on it. It looked beautiful. It was like, it's coming out of Revenge of the Sith. It's, it blends the Revenge of the Sith and Clone Wars. And then at that point in time, I was really hyped for it because it was tying into my nostalgia and my passion, and I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Let me say hi before you continue. Say hi to Lauren. Hi, Lauren. How you doing? Thanks for joining us today. Talking Bad Batch. Love to hear your thoughts on it. I saw some of your tweets out. I knew you were hyped for it. So thanks for being here, Lauren. Sorry, can you continue?
And then we got an Omega was announced, or I should say got shown, and then I was really connected to her, and I absolutely fell in love with her in the first episode. And yeah, I really am loving the Bad Batch because it is that blending. I noticed that the Bad Batch is a blending of the Clone Wars and Rebels. It seems like, where you have a lot of the settings with the Clone Wars and obviously the familiarity with it. You have the clones and stuff like that, but you also it intertwined with the tighter storytelling that was featured in Rebels. And then, of course, it's soaked in that post-Revenge of the Sith era. Like, I think right now, at the most, we are like 2 or 3 months out of Revenge of the Sith. Like, we're still really close to Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And every episode that I am watching, I am just loving it more and more. And I am not one of those people who's like want a bunch of cameos in my shows, but I feel like Bad Batch is doing a good job, even starting with episode 1 with Caleb, aka Kanan Jarrus. I thought that was done perfectly. And then we had Finnick Chan, and then obviously this leads us into this last episode. So yeah, I am absolutely loving Bad Batch.
Cool. Yeah, I had a similar reaction. I wasn't too in love with the Bad Batch arc on Clone Wars Season 7. So when it was announced, I was like, okay, I'll watch it, but I'm not really hyped for it. But at the same time, I know that Star Wars animation hasn't failed. Everything that they put out has been great. So I did have that, okay, I'm not too interested in it, but Star Wars animation has always been good, so I'll give it a chance. That first episode sold me on it. I really enjoyed that first episode. Unfortunately, we got to see Order 66 again, and we all had to suffer that trauma again, knowing what was going to happen. But I am enjoying that tighter storytelling, like you're saying. It's not the every 3-episode arcs like the Clone Wars. It's more Rebels in that there's one story that we're following. So I do enjoy that. And although there have been a few episodes for me that have gone up and down, this last one really got me back into it. I do like Omega. It got me a little bit. It took me a little bit to fall in love with her. I know a lot of people, like you said, from the first episode, as soon as people saw her, yeah, Omega will do anything for her. It took me a few episodes to get behind it, but I'm really liking Omega and really liking some of the storytelling that they're doing. I had it for later, but since you brought it up, the cameos, and you just said that the cameos there haven't been too many. Do you think? And I don't think so, but it's something I started to think about yesterday, that they're relying too much on cameos to keep the fans engaged in the story. Because we had Kanan in the first episode, and we have Fennec Shand, we had then Rex last time. Now we just said Cat Bane was here. Do you think they're relying too much on the cameos to keep the people kind of focused on the show, or do you think that storytelling in itself is enough?
So this is a loaded question. So I am going to say that it's really a complicated question because one of the frustrations that I have with Star Wars as it is right now is the over-reliance on the original trilogy and familiar characters. I feel like there is a balance that can be struck in animation does it really well. It seems like, yeah, you have, like in Rebels, you had Mon Mothma, you had Saw Gerrera, you had Fennec Shan and Bad Batch, but it seems like how these cameos, they fit a lot better into it. And it does a good job of connecting the universe to other series and stories in the thing, but it also makes the universe smaller.
Yeah.
So it's a really complicated situation because I think how it is handled in animation is a lot better than it was in Mandalorian season 2, where it's like every guest star was a plot. You know,
Sure.
you had Boba, and then you had the Boba series. You have Ahsoka, and then you had the Ahsoka series, and then you had the Rangers of the New Republic. So it just like all these guest spots in season 2 of the Mandalorian felt like shoehorned in to pitch story ideas for other things. Where it feels like in animation, it feels a little bit more natural and more connected, and I have been really enjoying it, but at the same time I am frustrated with this making the universe smaller. That's one of the problems Legends had, is like the universe was so small because it was always focused on the original trilogy characters, and it's such a hard thing to fit balance, and I think it makes sense to bring Cad Bane in because I don't know if you know or if people know that they originally had a story in the Clone Wars with Cad Bane and Boba Fett that they never really got to complete. So I think with David Filoni, he got to do this project, and I think it gives him an opportunity to finish some threads that he never really got to complete. Like the Clone Wars in season 7 was him completing Ahsoka's story. That was the point of the Clone Wars season 7. It wasn't to wrap up every single story. It was to complete Ahsoka's story. But you still have threads out there that need to be tied up. Like, I don't think we'll get this thread, but if you watch the Clone Wars, I believe Asajj Singh, Singh still has the Slave One, I believe. Boba Fett never really got the Slave One back, so that's a thread. And then obviously you have the thread of Cad Bane. Like, why isn't the Cad Bane around, in later stories and stuff like that? That story was already told, but we never really got to see it in its complete form. So the cameo and bringing Cad Bane in, I think, makes sense because I do believe it will lead into completion of his story that David Filoni never really got to do with his original runs with the Clone Wars, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I thought the same thing. Not as soon as I saw him, because I love seeing Cad Bane and the way he was utilized in this episode. But when you start thinking about, okay, so what else can Cad Bane do? That was one of the things that came into mind. Oh, now they have this opportunity to finish that storyline, which I know some people say, oh, it's already canon, because they said that story is canon, even if we didn't see it. But now we might be able to see it on live action, in animated here in the Bad Batch. And I hope they do show it at some point. With the cameos, I kind of go back and forth. I do understand that there might be a lot of them, but hearing other people talk, it's also who else can be around, because we're so close to the events of Clone Wars. So it makes a little bit of sense that we see some of the same characters. But one thing that we mentioned on our show last week with our guest, Wannabe Jedi podcast, was when you just say, why do we always focus on the same 10 characters? Everything happens to the same 10 characters. Let's expand the universe. So hopefully the second half of the season kind of lets the Bad Batch go by themselves and doesn't rely too much on those type of cameos. But again, it's a long series with a long season. We don't know how many seasons are going to be in this series. I do hope that they kind of hold back a little bit on cameos every other week. But so far, I'm really enjoying what they're showing. So
I would like to say that with the cameos that we have gotten so far in Bad Batch, they have either have had a purpose or you can just dismiss. Like, it was cool seeing a young Caleb, but his story never really changed except for the fact that Bad Batch was there. Fennec Chan is like a newer character, and it's like you want to grow her story, and having her in Bad Batch, yeah, maybe you didn't need her in Bad Batch, but it makes sense that she's a newer character and you're trying to, establish the legacy. Cad Bane has a purpose, like I said. They didn't want to complete that story. That makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, fans have wanted that story, and it just gives a chance for Dave to reinvent that story and so we get to have that story and that story actually be completed. With Rex, it makes a lot of sense because they needed to get the chips out of their head. And I listened to What the Force when they were talking about this episode, and she was like, they had the reason why they're doing it is so the Bad Batch can do it to others. So I'm hoping that we get a little clone rebellion. Led by the Bad Batch. But so the purpose for Rex to do it is you have to have somebody come and remove the chips and show them how, so they can remove the chips off some people, because I'm sure they will, because you still have a couple of the clone troopers from Rebels who don't have the chips that we don't see. Not that we need to see them get the chips removed, but it serves the purpose that we will see hopefully later this season, if not hopefully if they grant it like a season 2 or season 3.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what was said, but someone mentioned there was a line in one of the episodes, I think the previous one, with Rex saying something that alluded that there could be more clones out there where the chip didn't activate. And then it does make sense for the Bad Batch to know how to remove it to then go help any other clones that they might find. So that's very interesting. Hopefully it's something that we can see moving forward. So you mentioned you're a fan of Jedi Fallen Order, and we're still in Braca in this episode. You saw Braca on the previous episode, episode 7. What was your reaction seeing that planet? And then they're still there when this episode starts.
So I did not know that was the same planet as Jedi Fallen Order. I know. Blasphemous. I know. I was so embarrassed. It wasn't until I was, again, listening to What the Force, and they were talking about it, and they were like, that's the same planet as Jedi Fallen Order. I'm like, what? Oh my goodness. So yeah, I was really excited when I found out. It was awesome. I love seeing connection to Jedi Fallen Order. I think it is one of the best stories that we have gotten in canon, and I recommend that if you don't want to play it, it has a story mode which makes the game pretty much really easy, so you can just that's how I played Squadron, just so you can experience it. But I was so happy to see that connection.
Yeah, I didn't know. I remember hearing the name. I know I've heard that name Braca before, but I couldn't figure it out. So I searched for it and said, "Oh, Jedi Fallen Order." Okay, so don't feel too bad. It's impossible to remember everything out there. But then we also go back to Camino, and I think that's how the episode starts. We're in Camino. The Caminoans want to get Omega back. They say they have a contingency plan, and they have bounty hunters out there looking for her. Then we have this General Rampart, he's done with the clones and with the Caminoans. Do you have any theories why the Caminoans want Omega back and they're sending bounty hunters to try to find her? Do you have any idea what might be the importance of Omega for them, apart from, I guess, in being part of their family or something? But do you think there's another reason they're so inclined to find Omega?
Not offhand. I usually don't get too crazy with theories, because I feel like if you create a theory, you might get attached to it, and then you get disappointed when that doesn't happen. And I haven't really thought about any theories. But when you were asking that question, the thing that popped in my head is she's high value. Whether that is value to one of their clients, whether that's value to them, whether it's value to a purpose that she has, she's obviously high value. I try not to speculate too much, because I don't want things to go one way when I was expecting another way. I was kind of worried when Fennec Chan was hunting her down and we didn't see who hired her. I mean, obviously we assumed that it was Camille, but I was hoping that it wasn't going to be the person that she was cloned from. So I like the idea that she is cloned from Django and not from somebody else. So that's the only thing I'm crossing my fingers up, because I'm like, please don't be the mother that she was cloned from. Please don't be the woman that she was cloned for. Let her be because I find that story to be more interesting if she is a Django clone.
Yeah, and I've been hearing that a little bit more often, that design of Omega looks similar to a young Boba Fett on the Clone Wars. So we'll see. I'm hoping that we'll learn sooner rather than later who she was cloned from, what, if she has any of these advantages that the Bad Batch has, what it is. So.
I do have one, I guess you can call it theory. I think she's unaltered.
Okay.
I think she ages normally.
Okay, that's something that I heard yesterday also, and I hadn't really thought about it too much, but it will be interesting if it's another unaltered clone. So
it will be really interesting, and yeah. I'm trying not to get too excited here, but with David Filoni overseeing everything and him connecting Bad Batch to the Mandalorian with Fennec Chan, we know where they're going, or we have a general idea that they're going to do a TV version of Heir to the Empire with Thrawn. I mean, obviously it won't be the same story, but we know that Thrawn is the end game.
Yeah.
What if we see an older Omega? Because by the time that event happens, that event probably won't happen for another 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, we could get 2 or 3 more seasons of the Bad Batch. So if she doesn't age, which if I was in creative, I would have Omega age normally because she looks like she ages normally. So, and then you can have her around. Obviously, not connected to Rey. I mean, get that out of your head, people.
No, please.
but be a presence and a character, kind of like what they're doing with Grogu, where they're telling his story, and then 10 years down the line, they can tell like his adult life or whatever, creating these characters that they can build upon. So yeah, I believe that she is unaltered.
That'll be very awesome if she's unaltered, and then down the line she shows up at the end of this expanded universe that they're doing with that TV shows, bringing everything from the Mandalorian together with Thrawn of the Empire, and then she's there as an adult, I don't know, age-wise 40, 45 or something like that. It'll be very interesting. And first time I heard that, so yeah, that'll be really cool.
See, so I gotta crack this joke here. Could you imagine her meeting Boba Fett and looking at Boba Fett and be like, well, you look like heck, whatever heck, because the actor is older, where Boba Fett is supposed to be more in his 40, 50s, and she's like, it's kind of like wow, the world did not treat you well.
Yeah, I mean, those people that end up on Tatooine, look at Obi-Wan, how much he aged, and I mean, Boba Fett was in the belly of the Sarlacc for a few years or something, so it's understandable that he's a little bit messed up, but maybe not that much. So then we had the return of Crosshair and the Empire. I love this shot. It doesn't look too great in this screenshot, but I love seeing this shot in the animation when it dropped yesterday. I love just the animation in general. The whole episode was great, or the whole series. But how are you feeling with Crosshair? I like Crosshair as the bad guy right now, part of the Empire. I really like his storyline so far. What are your thoughts about Crosshair, kind of jumping from the Bad Batch, now being with the Empire, and where his story might lead?
At first, I was a little bit disappointed because I was like, the show is the Bad Batch. I want to see the Bad Batch, and then you have a traitor. But now I really like it. I like where they're going. Another theory that I really have connected to is that he's going to lead the team that will eventually become the Death Troopers. That makes a whole lot of sense because those are elite troopers. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting to have one of their own hunting them and to have that dynamic because you have their brother who they love, even more than regulars, being turned. Like, that the show's hopefully, it could end up with Crosshair dying or it couldn't, but you can see the Bad Batch actually fight to save their brother. And now, going back to Rex, now they know how to remove the chip. Yeah.
Will they try to get Crosshair in control and remove his chip? Will be very interesting. But that's something I talked about yesterday. It's because I've heard that before, that maybe this is the beginning of the Death Troopers and he's the first one. And jumping a little bit ahead on this episode, by the end, we know that he's hit with that blast from the engine. He gets all scarred. and maybe that has some issues with his eyesight. He can't be a good sharpshooter anymore. Maybe they do some enhancements on him, and that's where the Death Trooper comes in. His vocal cords might be all messed up, and then we have that weird voice that the Death Trooper have on Rogue One. I know in Resistance, the other TV show, they do talk regularly, but maybe this is the beginning of the Death Troopers with Crosshair as one of the first one. I really would like to see that happen because Crosshair wasn't my favorite of the Bad Batch group when they came out in Clone Wars, but I'm really liking him being this antagonist to his brothers, like you said, because eventually they'll have to confront each other a little bit more than they did in this episode, because they really didn't talk too much about it, but have kind of a 4-and-1 talking about, hey, we're brothers, why are you doing this? We're still on the same team. I want to see that come to a head. But having Crosshair as the villain right now for this group is really interesting to me, and seeing how the Empire keeps growing and growing in this new universe is very interesting, and something that I didn't think this show was going to be about, but it's really interesting me about. It's keeping me interested about it.
Another thing that I thought was interesting is we see that Crosshead got injured, and to me, it is very symbolic. We see this a lot in Star Wars, where if you set down the path of evil, it leads to damaging of yourself. Like we saw this with Anakin, you know, he loses his limb and eventually he gets burned and scarred. We see this with Palpatine, you know, with getting scarred. So it's that reminder. We see this a lot in Star Wars, where if you're evil and if you continue to set down the evil, it makes you physically repulsive because it's a visual medium. You need to show it. When in real life, it might not be the case, where it's like it leads to scars that build up and build up. You become uglier and uglier.
Yeah, I mean, a very cool way to see the evilness, kind of a visual representation of it. And you're right, it's Star Wars does that a lot. Look at Snoke for all of the sequel trilogy, also all scarred and messed up. But then the big reveal at the end is Cat Bane. So Hunter and everyone's running back to their ship. They're trying to get out of there, and then all this squad that Crosshair had sent over to protect the ship had been killed. And then we had the reveal of Cat Bane as the guy out there. Look at that guy. Cat Bane is back. I know a lot of people love him as their favorite bounty hunter. I've always liked Cat Bane. I really enjoyed seeing him here. I was very surprised. I didn't expect him to be there, but it was great to see Cat Bane. So what were your thoughts when you saw Cat Bane? I guess first heard him because we hear that voice first, and that's, oh man, that's Cat Bane, and then we get the reveal.
All right, so we knew that there was going to be a reveal this episode because there was hype build up on Twitter, and there was a lot of speculation that it was going to be Cal. So my mind was focused during the episode that one of the people that I was like, it's too soon to be Cal to be there. But when they were trying to stop the people from escaping, and you saw that familiar outfit, I'm like, okay, it's one of those people going to be turned out to be Cal. And then we went back to Camino and we saw them talking, and my mind went to Boba Fett. I'm like, okay, so they're going to bring in Boba Fett because Lucasfilm right now is hot on Boba Fett. And I was like, okay, I get it. I mean, I like this younger version of Boba Fett. You know, it makes sense. And so, and then I didn't even think about it. And then we see them go to the ships, and you had the clone troopers knocked out, and my mind went to some sort of Jedi. I was like, okay, I don't want to see Ahsoka in this because we already have a story in a book. I think at this period of time she shouldn't be around or something. I'm like, oh, don't, you know, it's going to be. So I was like, Ahsoka, you know, or some other source of Force user. And then I was eating at the time, so. And then we hear a voice, and I don't think it really connected. But when it was really confirmed to him, I may or may not have audibly screamed a couple times. So, because he's my favorite bounty hunter. I think he's awesome. Cool. I think he's cool. He's a lot more efficient. I mean, he didn't get defeated twice by a blind guy like a certain somebody.
Yeah. I mean, you can see I have my love for Boba Fett back here. I love my guy. But yeah, Cat Bane, he's one of the best out there. And when I heard that voice, I knew. Before that, when I saw the dead clone troopers, I had no idea who was there. I didn't know what happened. I thought Boba Fett when they mentioned bounty hunters at the beginning, because I saw that Fennec Shan in that episode, she was talking to Boba Fett. But then when I heard the voice, I also I didn't scream. I probably yelled, "Ah, Cat Bane!" I was really excited. And the design, let me put this picture back up. The design of Cat Bane is just, like I mentioned, the animation of this show is top notch. And the way Cat Bane looks in this episode with this little droid was great. And it's a great surprise seeing him there. He has that Western standoff with Hunter. He wants Omega. Hunter tried his best, but unfortunately, you can't go toe to toe with Cat Bane just on a straight up shootout. So Hunter gets knocked out. Were you at all concerned that Hunter might have died at that moment, that they might have killed him, or it's too early to kill any of the Bad Batch?
So before I talk about that, when they were having the draw off, I'm like, this is very familiar of his confrontation with Boba Fett.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And to me, I saw that episode, and for me, it's more world building because, spoiler alerts for the deleted story arc, but in the deleted story arc, Boba Fett and Cad Bane have a shoot-off where Boba Fett wins. He kills Cad Bane, and Cad Bane gets his helmet. That's where it gets the thing. But I was like, okay, I'm watching this shot, and I'm like, okay, you're establishing that Cad Bane is a shooter that you don't want to have an old Western style because he's quick. He's a quick draw. To me, that is establishing that we're going to see it later again with Boba Fett winning again, telling that story that was deleted in a thing. So I'm like, okay, you're establishing it. So I was not. So I was like, I'm a huge Cad Bane fan, but like the Bad Batch, they're the main characters. So when that was happening, I'm like, okay, I was kind of like expecting Hunter to win or some sort of thing to stop him, whatever. But then he gets shot, and I didn't think much about it. And then over time, I was like, did they really? No.
No,
it can't be that he didn't move or whatever, and they pick up Omega, and I was more stunned because we knew that Omega was going to eventually get captured. I was more shocked, like, no way. No, they killed Hunter? Oh my God. But we see that did not happen, but when that happened, it didn't click at first.
Yeah, me neither.
But after a while, like, no. If they would have killed him, it would have been ambitious. It would have been bold. It would have been shocking.
Yeah.
It would have been tragic. But yeah, even though he was still alive, it didn't take me out of that moment. I was like, oh, no. So
I don't know. I didn't not for a second did I think he was dead, and I don't know why. I think I was still hyped about seeing Cat Bane. That I didn't think about Hunter. But the more I hear people talking about, we did think that Hunter was dead and he got shot right in the chest. So yeah, that was a good possibility. And you're right. If they would have decided at that point, halfway through the first season, to kill the main Bad Batch, it would have been bold and ambitious. But yeah, thankfully that didn't happen. But unfortunately, Omega got hit upside the head with that droid jet booster, was captured, and then the rest of the Bad Batch come. They pick up Hunter. We had that great shot looking from inside his helmet as they drag him back into the ship, which I thought was a great shot by the art department. And then they head out. Now they have to try to find who took Omega. What's Cat Bane going to do with her? So as we kind of close talking about the Bad Batch and this episode, I know you say you don't like theorizing too much, but what are you hoping to see on these final 8 episodes of the first season? Anything in particular you're hoping to see or that you think we might get?
Before I answer that, I want to say that the Bad Batch sure takes a beating. I mean, poor Wrecker gets hit in the head multiple times. I mean, Crosshead is scarred. I wouldn't be surprised if Hunter got some sort of damage, getting shot like that. It's just like the poor babies just keep getting beaten up. But they really go through the ringer. To answer your question, I am just trying to enjoy the story. I don't really have any theories or where I would like things to go, because obviously there's predictable thing. I mean, obviously they gotta save Omega. To me, I see them going to an ally or allies to
Okay.
save her, to go into the base to try to save her. I see them having some sort of conclusion, obviously with Crosshair. I don't know if we'll see that all in season 1. I think if I were them, I would try to stretch the show into like at least 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, it's really hard to say because we know it's really hard because Mandalorian season 2 is like, okay, we know this is going to happen. Oh, they'll save that for the last episode, and then it's like the next episode. It's like, okay. So it's really hard to say if they're going to go and save the next episode or if they're going to have a couple episodes in between. It's really hard, but we know they're going to save her. The question is do they go to Rex for assistance? Do they have another ally? Do they go to Saw Gerrera? Do they what is that going to be like? It's really hard to speculate with any confidence because it is so wide open, but we know they're going to save Omega.
Yeah. I mean, as we're talking here, the name that comes to mind that they might try to reach out, I think, is the Martez sisters. They have some connection to the underground and to the underworld. So they might be someone, hey, we're trying to find a clone bounty hunter that looks like this, whatever. Maybe they're the ones that they reach out to. Gives the Martez sisters a little bit more to do than just that one episode that they were there. So yeah, it will be very interesting how they move forward for the second half, trying to find Omega. I also think our other bounty hunters now going to be chasing Cat Bane, similar to what they're doing with the Book of Boba Fett comic, with other bounty hunters trying to get Han Solo. Will other bounty hunters, Fennec Shan, who knows if Boba Fett or anyone else, goes after Cat Bane to try to get Omega to bring her to Camino. So it'll be very interesting what they do with the last 8 episodes. But yeah, it's very difficult to speculate. And like you said, we try to keep it fun, not a lot of speculating and theorizing, because when it doesn't happen, we don't want to get mad. We just want to enjoy the story that we're told. And I think if you're good, if you have anything else to talk about or that you want to say about this episode, I'm ready to move on and talk some Count Dooku. Are you ready?
I am definitely ready, but I would like to say quickly that it was so great to see the Mantell, I'm butchering that name, sisters back in Bad Batch, and it's very Clone Wars where you have featured characters in this one arc and then they come back. I was hoping we would see them again because I really like seeing them. They gave a good perspective of the universe, and I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that they might actually reach out to the Mattel sisters, but we know that they have a connection with Rex. But I can definitely see them not necessarily joining the rebellion or the pre-rebellion, but working with Bill. I can see that, but it's really hard to say.
Yeah. And yeah, one thing just saying about the pre-rebellion, and that you mentioned at the very beginning, how much time has passed since Order 66 to where we are now in the Bad Batch, is that question that we are all asking. Because at first I'm like, man, everything's happened too quickly. It's how is the Martez sisters already talking to Rex? How did Rex get in touch with them? It's only been a few weeks. But then on the previous episode, we know that they've been on a bunch of missions because of all the Martell mix that Omega and Wrecker have been eating. So it has to have been a couple of months, at least 2 to 3 months, I think. But it's hard to tell how much time has passed. But it'll be interesting going forward.
That is the thing about canon, is they try to be very ambiguous about what the time period was. It's also a little frustrating. It's like, oh, this takes place. We're not telling you exactly when, because they want to be able to have that flexibility to move up and down the stories and tell stories in between stories. I get it, but it's really frustrating not having that, that story pinned down to that time theme. So that's definitely on purpose.
Yeah. All right. So episode 9 of the Bad Batch coming out next week. Wrecker is down. Wrecker, it's me having all those headaches and hitting his head, like you say, has a few concussions. Hunter is down. Echo and Tech, I'm sure, going to get hit sooner or later. They all are getting hit and hit hard. Poor Crosser got burned. So, yeah, they're suffering a little bit. So we'll see next week. But let's move on to our next segment. And since we're talking about a book that came out a while ago, this segment is our Star Wars Rewind. All right, and today we are talking about Dooku Jedi Lost. It's a great book by Cavan Scott, who's one of the architects of the High Republic. He has one of the new High Republic books coming out in a week or so, The Rising Storm. Can't wait to dive deep into that. But today we're talking Dooku Jedi Lost. So for you, because you read this book or listened to it before I did, so this came out as an audio drama, right? Was it an audio play? Do you know the exact phrasing? Is it an audio drama, audio play?
A lot of people call it an audiobook. I call it an audio drama.
Okay.
Because audiobooks are usually read by one person with maybe one or two other people doing voices for certain characters, where an audio drama is full production, where you have multiple people. It actually has a cast. So I count it as an audio drama. A lot of people call it an audiobook. I think the technical term is a audio drama.
Yeah, and I do think you're right, because this is, when you read it as a print form like I did, it's basically a play. It tells you all the characters, who's talking, what the setting is, any background noises. It's very descriptive, like an audio drama would be, or a play that you would watch. So, real quick, before reading this book, were you a Count Dooku fan? What made you say, yeah, I'm gonna dive into this book or this audio drama when it came out?
So one of the stories I always wanted is I wanted more stories featuring Count Dooku and Yoda. I wanted that because Count Dooku, even in Legends, and I always have to put a disclaimer, I am still reading Legends, so I have to be very familiar. But even in Legends, they really didn't dive into his character in a lot of depth. I mean, obviously he pops up in these other stories, and he's in the Clone Wars, and we see him as a Sith Lord, but we really didn't dive into his youth, where he came from, his background, his training with Yoda, how he was master to Qui-Gon and their relationship. So it wasn't the exact story, because it didn't dive into these particular stories as deep as I would have liked. Like, it would have been awesome to have a whole book about Qui-Gon and Count Dooku and their relationship. Or vice versa with Yoda and Count Dooku. We get bits and pieces of those stories in it, but it was still a story about a character that even in Legends there wasn't a whole lot about. Before then, it was really kind of hard to be a Count Dooku fan, because again, there wasn't much about him. Just the Clone Wars that we really knew about. It was kind of hard to really get attached to him, because he's an old man at this point in time. I believe canonically he's in his 80s. So you have this whole life that you don't know nothing about, and you can like him, you could be attached to him, but there's a whole lot of mystery, because even Palpatine, we see him later in life, but with the Dark Plagueis book, we see more of his life. Count Dooku never really got that. So like I said, I'm a prequel baby. So any stories that connect to the prequels or take place in the prequels, I am really right away excited for. So when it was announced in 2019, I was really excited for it. And you have Ventress, and I love Ventress.
Yeah, I mean, Ventress, one of those characters created for the animation, has just took a life of her own, and everyone loves her, and they've done a great job with her, and she's great in this book also. I thought we were gonna get a little more with her, but it was really focused on Count Dooku and his childhood, from being an initiate in the Jedi Temple, and then as a Padawan to Yoda, and then he has his mentor, this other Jedi, Line Costana. That relationship was great, and yes, seeing Count Dooku, I like Count Dooku from Attack of the Clones, from the Clone Wars, but wasn't that big of a fan. So that's probably why I didn't pick the book or the audio drama when it came out. But I only heard great things about it. So reading this book, and not only did we learn a lot about Dooku growing up, but also life inside the Jedi Temple for these younger Padawans, which is something we've never seen before. And I found that very interesting, very engaging, seeing these lightsaber tournaments that he was going to, so a master could pick his Padawan apprentice. the different houses or clans that they had. He's part of the Hawk Bat clan, and there's like two or three more clans out there. It made it feel like this Hogwarts of sorts, like this Harry Potter type of life out there that we've never seen in Star Wars before. And I do hope that we see more of that, even a TV show, if it's animated or whatever. Seeing that life of younger Jedi as they're growing up inside the Jedi Temple was very interesting, and one of my favorite parts of this book. Did you enjoy that part, seeing that Jedi life inside the temple for younger Jedi?
Oh yeah, because one of my favorite books, I mean, obviously I didn't read all of them, but growing up, I am the Jedi Apprentice generation.
Okay.
For people who do not know, Jedi Apprentice is a book series done by Judy Watson that tells the relationship between young Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, and how their relationship gets tightened up and how it originally started, and we get to see a little bit of inside the Jedi Temple and Obi-Wan's training and how Qui-Gon picked him, and we get to see that relationship, and we get to see a little bit of that prequel trilogy side of the universe and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really great to see that, and it was great world building as well, because not only did we get to see inside the Jedi Temple and their policies and all that sort of thing, but we also got to see what the universe was like before the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And when I originally, I'm trying to think here. When I originally read it, that was before I read Dark Plagueis. So it was my first time really seeing that outside of the Jedi Apprentice books that I here and there that I read when I was younger. So, and I would assume that for many people, especially those who are new to Star Wars and like you and I decided to jump into the extended universe, that was probably their first time seeing that side too.
Yeah, because I haven't read those first books that you mentioned. I haven't read those, but seeing this world inside from the eyes of a younger Jedi is very interesting, because we're used to seeing in the movies, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and all that. We see the Jedi Temple from their eyes, but seeing it from the younger kids, not even Padawans at this point, just initiate, getting in trouble, having their little groups, always the rivalries going, was very interesting. This kind of growing of age kind of story for Dooku. We see Sifo Dyas also, that was only a mention in Attack of the Clones. He has, I think, one episode in Clone Wars maybe, and then he's really featured here as Dooku's best friend. He's having all these visions and premonitions of the future. The Jedi Council, we see how they start. Forget about it. Don't mess with it. We don't want to deal with it. And we see how the council starts kind of that downhill that we see in the prequels. But also, this book is told through different story points or different points of views, I guess, and different timelines. We have Asajj Ventress looking at all these recordings from Dooku's early life, while at the same time she's chasing down Dooku's sister. We find out that he has a sister, and Ventress is tasked with finding her. Did you enjoy this back and forth between the stories, or was it a little bit confusing keeping track of it? For me, I did enjoy the back and forth, especially because we learned also a lot about Ventress. But did you enjoy this back and forth in the timelines?
I would have to say that before I dive into that, is this book is Count Dooku's book, but it serves more than one purpose, because we do get to learn more about Dooku's life, his origin, his family, but we also dive into Ventress' origin when it comes to how she became, in canon, into the services of Count Dooku and her past. Like, we get to see a little bit of that in the Clone Wars, so it kind of like served a little bit as her origin too. Now, her story is similar as it was in Legends when it comes to how Dooku came across it, but with a little bit twist or whatever, because the story takes place shortly after she comes into the service of Count Dooku. She still has burns from the lightning from their first encounter. And another thing is it expands on Sifo Dyas.
Yes.
So it is Count Dooku's story, but it has a lot of... For me, it is the canon version of Dark Plagueis. where it is a book that expands upon the prequel trilogy that answers a lot of questions. I am not in love with Dark Plagueis for another issue, but you can definitely see the relationship between it. It's two books that takes place before the prequel trilogy. It connects to the prequel trilogy. It answers a lot of questions that we have about the prequel trilogy, and it just so to me it's like the canon version of Darth Plagueis focusing on different characters. So yeah, it's about those three characters. Back to your original question. The first time I listened to the audio drama, it was a little bit distracting, being like, okay, what timeline are we in? We're jumping back and forth. But I really like the setting. But it's another thing that canon does is it tells stories of a story being told inside of a story, and that allows them flexibility of to tell it. It's like if there's any contradiction, it's like, no, this person was telling a story. They obviously didn't remember it right or whatever. That's just again how they tell stories. It allows them more flexibility. However, I still really enjoyed it, but it's also like really frustrating because it's like, okay, that didn't happen. Well, they were telling the story. What really got annoying or distracting is when Ventress was watching the journal of Dooku telling a story. So it was a story inside a story.
Yeah.
Inception level.
Yeah, I do. I get how that can be confusing just listening to it. But I did enjoy learning a lot about Ventress because we know Ventress from Clone Wars is this great assassin out there. There's so much to her or how she came to that point. She was sold off by the Night Sister, then became a slave to this other person. Then her master, Kainarek, kind of breaks her free, but really didn't train her as the other Jedi would. Was never taken to the temple and go through the same Jedi process that Dooku took. And she kind of is jealous at one point about not being in those Jedi tournaments. And then seeing how broken down she is, she's having these conversations with the ghost of her dead master. And he's trying to tell her, you can escape. You don't need to be here right now. And she just feels so threatened by Dooku that she can't run away. So it's this character that we see her in the Clone Wars as this menace. But it's also she's been beaten down to a pulp where that's the only thing that's left of her. And it does humanize her a little bit. Also Dooku when he's growing up. But it makes you feel bad for Ventress and everything that she's went through. And by the end of the book, I know we're jumping in and it doesn't matter. We're just kind of talking general. She's first tasked with finding Dooku's sister. And by the end, I told you to find her so you could kill her for me because I don't want her revealing my secrets to the Jedi or to the Republic. And then she just does it without question. And it's this character that we kind of feel for just by having her read or go through Dooku's story. But also her story in this book is it made her more sympathizing, at least for myself. Did you feel something like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Ventress is one of those characters that is always on the knife's edge. Like you always could feel like at any moment before she actually leaves Dooku, that she could walk away from this. She always felt like she was a character on the edge. She wasn't as committed as a Savage Opress or a Maul Dooku. She always felt like she was on this edge. She felt very relatable. She felt like obviously she's a villain. She does horrible things. I mean, she's a freaking assassin. But she always felt like somebody who you could be friends with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, just don't make her mad, but yes.
Yeah. She at least that's the vibe I get. I don't know what that says about me, but when it comes to the conversation that she has with her former master, I commit to the idea that in Star Wars canon, Qui-Gon Jinn is the first one to go into the Force, without being able to come into a Force ghost. So when I was listening to it, I was turned off by it at first because I'm like, she shouldn't be around because we know that Qui-Gon was the first one to do it. So I always took it that it was her conscious. Yeah, and then when she finally gives into the dark side and kills Dooku's sister, he's gone. So it is. I always took it that it was, and if you listen to how he talks to somebody who is recounting stuff that she already knew, and where there was holes there was holes in his memory too. So I always took it as her conscious, or the Force manifesting as her conscious, where he was telling her stuff that she already knew, maybe
Yes.
has forgotten, but it wasn't this like thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to tell you something that you didn't know. If that makes any sense. So I always
Yeah.
took it that it was her conscious.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. I know I said with her former master's ghost. I think that's the way they cannot say it's talking to the ghost, but yeah, it is of course her consciously trying to talk herself through everything. But it's very interesting. Again, learning more about Ventress this way, and then like you mentioned, we learn more about Sifo Dyas. We also learn a little bit about Dooku's first apprentice, Rael Averos, that we met in Claudia Gray's Master and Apprentice. He's here and also give us a little bit more background. We get a little bit, not too much, with Qui-Gon Jinn. Hopefully, if they do a follow-up to this story, then we can get that story of Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn kind of growing up, going through that relationship. But we also start seeing how the Jedi and the Council at this point is already on the downturn. We see them telling Dooku and Sifo Dyas and Lene Costana, don't worry about Sifo Dyas' visions. We're not going to do anything about it. They were late trying to save that planet that was going to burn in the storm. Thousands of people died because the Jedi didn't act properly. They're telling Dooku to suppress his emotions when he found out that he had a family out there. And then there's corruption inside the council because one of their members had a son, had a kid that's now a Jedi. So we start seeing that the Jedi are not these holy people that we believed. And by the time we get to the prequels, they're already too far gone, and Palpatine is able to do things right under their nose. But I did enjoy seeing this part of how the Jedi Council, even Yoda, which I love, was already, dude, you gotta listen to the young kids. They're telling you something. But it's cool seeing also that the Jedi Council already going that downward path.
Yeah, it was definitely really getting that. It was definitely interesting seeing that perspective and that side. I mean, obviously we saw it in other stories, but being inside of that when it was like 50 years before the prequel trilogy and that the dynamic and stuff. And it also shows the Republic too, because we saw how you had the incident with the Bacca, where you had people that were more concerned about the loss of profits than they were of human life, and it just shows it subconsciously built into Dooku's disillusionment with not only the Jedi but with the Republic too.
Yeah, that's right, and that just slowly pushing him to that separatist side because he sees the Jedi and the Republic not really helping everyone that they could help. The Bacta, yeah, okay, that's profit. No, but look all the people that might die. We weren't here on time. If we follow what Sifo Dyas is letting us know, we can help more people out there in the Outer Rim or everywhere. He starts to get disillusioned with it, and we don't see basically anything with it on this book, but there's a little bit of Palpatine starting to manipulate Dooku a little bit. So we can see how he kind of edges toward that end. So all in all, I really enjoyed Dooku Jedi Lost. I wish I had gotten it sooner and probably heard the audio drama because it seems to be maybe the better experience. So I did enjoy reading it a lot. There were a lot of High Republic kind of winks and nods, I think. There's mentions of a Master Trennis. That's one of the fallen 20 of the 20 Jedi that are lost to the dark side, and we know there's a Keith Trennis in the High Republic, so is it the same character? So yeah, can't wait to see if there are any more connections. Really enjoyed this book. Anything else you might want to say about Count Dooku Jedi Lost, or just Dooku in general before we kind of close the show up today?
So another one of the reasons why I really like this book is Count Dooku. He was a hero. We see him when he's the villain of the story, but he's already have lived a full life.
Yeah.
He was, at least when he turned to the dark side completely, he was probably in his 70s at least. You figure that he probably, even then, even if he turned in his 60s, he was an old man. He lived a life. He was a hero. He was renowned. He was a master. He had not only one apprentice but two. He was a good man. And also in this book, we see that he was the Anakin Skywalker of his generation.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a prodigy. He was the best of his class, of his generation. He fell victim due to his family ties. It's really striking how similar his story is with Anakin, and how tragic it is too, because he was a good man, and it was his corruption to the dark side, being exposed to the dark side when they went to the planet with the ooze thing. And also you had the dark side beast, and you can't put yourself in a when he finally snaps, you can't put yourself in that situation and not be like, I would have done the same thing, because he got beaten down by his father, his brother. It was an abusive situation. They wanted nothing to do with him. So, of course, he was going to snap. There was no way you would be in that situation and not snap. And I think that's why I really like this book. And it really makes me a big fan of Dooku, because, yeah, Dooku is a villain. He's the bad guy. He definitely should have died, and not just for the purpose for Vader to come about, but because he was bad guy. But before he turned, he was a hero.
Yeah.
And I wish we would get more stories with the hero Dooku. And I like this portrayal of Dooku more than I like the portrayal of him in Master and Apprentice, because we see a little bit of the dark side with him in Master Apprentice, but he was already a master at that time.
Yeah.
But there was still like a good 40 years of his life where, like I said, I cannot stress this enough, he was a hero.
Yeah, he's basically a hero throughout this book till he kind of leaves the Jedi to be the Count of Sereno after his brother died and all that. And I do love in this book how we learn all the different ways that the dark side might corrupt someone. We always think about, the Sith and Palpatine, they're corrupting a Jedi. No, there's, I think, the Takataka or whatever that weird bird is called. Then they go to the planet, which is very infused with the dark side, when they go to try to find some Sith relics. And that's what really starts turning Dooku to the dark side. And he kind of lets his whole power go, and all the Sith lightning comes out. So it's very interesting that he wasn't corrupted by Palpatine since the beginning. He went through a whole life having all these dark side visions through Sifo-Dyas and dark side influences on the planet, the beast on Sereno. So that was very interesting. Like you say, he was a hero to the Republic, to the Jedi, to his planet, all the way till the end. It was very interesting to see that whole turn. And hopefully we do get more with him. Like you said, there's like 40 or 50 years of stories that we can tell with him, with Rey Laveros, more with Qui-Gon Jinn. I do hope that they do focus on some of those in the future. So very great. Yeah, go ahead. So we finish up.
I just want to say one more thing, and I would like to say that when he walked away from the Jedi Order to the hit, it was in good intentions.
Yeah.
Like you walk away from the book at that point in time when he's like, I'm just going to become a Duke, Duke.
Maybe also Duke.
A count, and I'm going to take care of my people, because if the Republic comes in, they just only want the material that was discovered. They don't care about the people. So you get the fact that he was disillusioned with the Republic and the Jedi Order, that he walked away from that, which exposed himself. I mean, obviously he opened himself up to the dark side, but he wasn't corrupted yet, which leads me to believe that he at this point in time, he was still good. I mean, obviously he gave into the dark side a couple of times, but he's still good, which leaves the door for Palpatine to come in and prey on his disillusionment, which eventually turns him and embrace the dark side. And we see this symbiotically, like when he has the brace on his arm for balance, and when he takes that off, he's immediately exposed. That is symbolic of him. He's like, okay, I know the dark side, I have it in control. That comes off, and he opens up to the dark side, and that's like a very symbolic thing. The last thing I would like to say is I hope we get a trilogy
Hmm.
with this book. Like we got the first one. The second one could be Palpatine corrupting him. And then the third one could be like what they're doing with the Padme trilogy and have it told in the
Okay.
Clone Wars.
Yeah, and there's a lot that they can do with this. And I wish they had those wrappings for Anakin when he started turning to the dark side. Just wrap Anakin on those arm wraps, and maybe it would have helped. But yeah, for you guys out there, if you haven't picked it up, either paperback, audio drama, Dooku Jedi Lost by Cavan Scott, the great Cavan Scott. So pick it up. It's a great read. Even if you're not a Dooku fan, this book will make you a Dooku fan. So, all right. So, with that said, I want to thank my guest, Jedi Geek Girl, for being here. Pleasure meeting you. It's awesome talking with you, learning more about your podcast, I Rebel, talking about Bad Batch, and of course, Dooku Jedi Lost. So, thank you again for being here, and let people out there know where they can find you.
Sure. Again, thank you so much for having me on. I definitely could keep on talking about these two things I really enjoy. If you would like to find me, you can find me everywhere at Jedi Geek Girl. You can find my podcast everywhere by searching I Rebel, a Star Wars podcast. You can also find my podcast on social media at I Rebel Destiny, and our website is irebeldestiny.com.
All right. So again, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure. And yeah, we can keep going on and on. Next time we'll have you back and we'll keep talking about Star Wars or everything. We can always talk about something out there. So for myself, thank you guys that were here in the chat and were watching or listening to this later on. You can find us Twitter and Instagram on Radio Rebel Pod. We also have our website, Radio Rebellion Podcast.wordpress.com. We do have our book reviews there, podcast episode, news items, everything there. So thank you guys. Thank you again to Jedi Geek Girl, and stay safe, be safe, and may the force be with you.
Radio